Hello. In this video we're going to look at some of the elements that go together to make up your research essay. You might hear about elements such as a broad topic or a narrow topic. You'll also hear about debatable statements, your position regarding the debatable statement. You'll hear about scopes. Naturally, there'll be a thesis statement involved, a counter-argument, and after the counter-argument you'll hear about refutations. That's the first body paragraph. Then body paragraph 2 comes next. Then a body paragraph 3, perhaps even body paragraph 4, and then finally you'll come to your conclusion paragraph. And all these elements go together to make up the research essay type 1. First, you'll need to choose a topic related to your mainstream. Perhaps your mainstream is health sciences, and an example of a topic would be health and fitness. This, of course, is a very broad topic. So you need to narrow the topic further. Why narrow it? Because you're only going to be writing an essay of 1,500 words or so, not a book and not a thesis. Here's an example of some narrowing. The impact of diet on health and fitness. Next, choose a debatable aspect of the impact of diet on health and fitness. Why debatable? Because you're going to be doing an argumentative essay. And as we all know, an argumentative essay turns on or focuses around debatable statements. Here's an example. Vegetarian diets are more beneficial than diets which include meat. This is debatable because not everybody agrees. There are some people who agree and some people who disagree with this. But what about your opinion regarding this? Well, you will need to make what we call an assertion about the topic. An assertion is just a statement that expresses an opinion or a position or a point of view. Well, you have to limit your writing, of course, and in an essay of this length, the most common number of scope points or limiting points are 3. So go to the library and research 3 supporting points to limit the scope of your assertion. Okay, I suggest you do it this way and try not to think of the scope points beforehand because you might not find anything that you thought of. However, if you go to the library and do some research, then you will know that the materials are there to support your essay. Here's an example. Now, you may have found 3 sources, one by Peter Singer about health reasons, another one by the World Bank, who have produced a report on economic reasons, and a third author, Noam Chomsky, might have written about ethical reasons. And these are your 3 support reasons, 3 reasons supporting your position on the topic. With all those pieces of information, you can compose a thesis statement now. And here's an example of a thesis statement. The government should promote vegetarian diets because vegetarian diets are more beneficial than diets which include meat for health, economic and ethical reasons. Okay? Then you'll be coming on to the body, and body paragraph 1 will consist of a counter-argument and a refutation, and you will need to do some more research. See if you can find in your reading of books or journal articles 1 counter-argument and 1 refutation for body paragraph 1. Here are some examples. For the counter-argument, perhaps the Dairy Producers Association it wants to argue about the meat being the source of proteins. And then you might find a Robert Smith who refutes this and can talk about non-meat sources of protein. Then we'll need to move on to the next part of the body, and for this you'll need to form paragraphs, and as we know, paragraphs begin with topic sentences. So this time you're going to form topic sentences with appropriate citation verbs for the information from Singer, the World Bank, Chomsky, the Dairy Producers Association, and Smith, and anyone else that you've done some research on. Then, once you've found information from these people, you can't copy what they say. You have to put it into your own words. In other words, you have to paraphrase their information. Paraphrase with in-text references and citation verbs the views of Singer, the World Bank, and so on. Now remember, we ask you to paraphrase because then we know whether you understand what you've read or not. Now we're actually going to be moving back into the introduction, and you should do a bit of reading or some thinking to find background information for the introduction, the part of the introduction which comes before the thesis statement. Then we focus on the conclusion, and you start the conclusion with a restatement of the thesis statement. All right, the next part of the conclusion is your closing thoughts. So you need to think of or find some advice or warnings or predictions about your topic to conclude your essay.